Whether your business has 6 floors or 6 employees, Walmart Business has everything you need to save time, money, and hassle. You can restock your break room with bulk ordering or bulk up your ordering team with shared payments. And you can get it all delivered straight to your business's door, whether that's on Wall Street or Main Street. Walmart Business. It's the Walmart you love, now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com.
New Year, same extra value meals at McDonald's. So now get 2 snack wraps, plus fries, and a medium soft drink for just $8.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
Good morning, Crust. It's a great day to be a bread brother.
Ugh, mornings are not my jam. Or jelly.
Oh, come on. Stop loafing around.
I just woke up feeling hollow inside.
Psst, just grab one of the new Morning Uncrustables sandwiches, like Bright-Eyed Berry or Up and Apple, filled with 12 grams of protein and tons of deliciousness. Crust, what are you eating?
It's just granola, not even yogurt.
No crust, no fuss. Uncrust your mornings.
Welcome to No Question About That. This is United Inc., our football finance show with Subprime Goals, also known as Jamie. How's it going?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Ed. Obviously, a little bit of a weird day today.
Yeah.
With the news that we've had, but eager to still crack on and shed some light on the world of football finance and how it relates to United.
I'm obviously a fair few hours behind London. Woke up, saw people talking about Diogo Jota, was a bit confused, but God, a real tragedy. Him and his brother dying in a car crash in northern Spain today. 28 years old, leaves behind 3 tiny kids as well, and a new bride. He only got married a couple of weeks ago. Really puts things into perspective. Like kicking the ball around, not that important as much as we talk about it 24/7. When someone so young dies in this sort of manner, you kind of have to take a step back and go, bloody hell.
Absolutely, and well said.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not very good with speeches about this kind of stuff. People put like great long things on Twitter, and I'm like, yeah, not sure I can follow that. There's a lot of policing of language as well, I noticed. Like people making inappropriate jokes, which is always going to happen. And then the reaction, I kind of think all of that, both the bad taste jokes and the reaction to it, kind of takes away from the moment, which should be about the man and celebrating his life and thinking about the people who are closest to him.
No, I agree. And I think I'm similar. I'm not too great with words in these moments, but I think it's just nothing other than sadness. And I think feeling for his loved ones, you know, as you said, his recent wife, his children, and the people that are close to him. I think, you know, when things like this happen, as you say, it puts a lot of things into perspective, and I think forces you just to almost like rethink things a little bit and just, you know, are your priorities in the right place? Are you doing the right things? Because you just never know when things like this can happen.
Well, quite, yeah. There is a football finance angle to it, but I think we'll skip that for today and move on to our main agenda. So we're going to talk about things that are a bit sort of tangential to United, I guess, but relate back. So Barcelona and their debt, there's a refinancing, gives us some indicator of what the market is like now for refinancing. Villa and their PSR issues. What are the issues? How are they different in the Premier League and UEFA? And how does it relate to both the sale of their women's team and potentially a transfer for Ollie Watkins, which has been on the cards, not necessarily to United, for a while. And then a little bit about Chelsea. How can they afford so many players? Why do they have so much PSR headroom? What other loopholes might they find in the deep, dark recesses of the Premier League handbook? I'm sure there's some others that Todd Bowley has been getting his lawyers on. So let's crack on. Barcelona refinanced at least part of their debt. Their debt's actually over €1 billion, and this was I forget what number, several hundred million of it. They released a bond on, and the interesting part here is the kind of level of interest, which I saw it in a tweet from a Spanish newspaper, and all I saw was the number, and my Spanish is crude. And I was like, oh, interesting. So what is it? How might it impact United?
Yeah, so Barcelona have gone down a route of renovating their stadium in a manner that's similar to Real Madrid. And they started that process back in 2023, and they basically set up an SPV, which allowed them to basically raise debt to fund that. And the total debt capacity that they have within that vehicle is about 1.4 billion euros. Now, the way that was structured, there was multiple loans within that, and they all had different maturity dates, i.e. dates that you had to repay the loan, and different levels of interest rate. And in summary, the interest rates on those loans range from something in the region of like 6% to 7.2%. And a lot of those loans were, in fact, something called a bullet loan, which is effectively the principal amount that you are being lent is paid back in one go on the day that the loan finishes. Now, for Barcelona, they basically had a tranche of debt of around about 150 million euros that was due to be repaid in 2028. That's the bit that they have refinanced. They've done that by raising about 450 million euros. So an additional 300 million, which it's not entirely clear exactly what that's for, but that's probably some overruns on the build and renovation, as well as other kind of general working capital. But what that has allowed them to do is basically postpone that 150 million payment in 2028 all the way back to 2023. So they don't start repaying that new debt that they've got for another 8 years, which obviously gives them like a lot of leeway. And then from a cash flow perspective, and as you say, the most interesting thing about this is this new debt, 450 million euros, is at around about a 5.2% interest rate. Now that is obviously low versus where they're at, but also pretty low in the context of other refinancing that's gone on more recently. So Everton obviously have been recently taken over by the Friedkin Group. They had a 350 million pound refinancing as part of that for the new stadium that they've got. The interest rate on that was about 7 to 8%. Real Madrid, for their renovation towards the end of last year, and I think we've mentioned this on previous pods, they raised just under 400 million euros, and that was somewhere between 5 to 7%. So I think all of this is pointing to overall, the environment appears to potentially be getting a little bit better to raise stadium debt. And I think there are a number of reasons for this. You know, I think some of it is, well, there's a lot more projects to go after and there's a lot more benchmarking that you can do. Makes it much easier to price these sorts of things. Obviously, interest rates have come down a little bit, but I think the other thing that maybe tips the scales in Barcelona's favour is obviously their on-pitch performance.
Yeah, and they are doing €1 billion of revenue a year. So despite all the drama, and much of it is to do with the Spanish league rules around how much of their income they're actually allowed to use in the transfer market, and that's where Tebas, the Spanish league president, and Laporta, Barcelona's president, fight it out all the time about whether they're allowed to use one-to-one, as in they sell a player for 10 million euros, they can bring 10 million back into the transfer budget, or 1-to-3 as it was at one point, which they sell a player for 30 million euros and they can only spend 10 million of it. And that's the battle. The interesting part for United are, well, one, we have 2 sets of bonds that mature in 27 and 29, I think I'm right in saying. I mean, there's more than $500 million worth of bonds there in one way or another, and everyone will be looking at that interest rate. We got a pretty low interest rate because it was just at the beginning of the free money era, I guess, when those bonds were initially launched. They were oversubscribed, and so, you know, it said something healthy about United at the time. Also kicked off the green and gold campaign in a pretty radical way, because we could all see inside exactly what was happening. United obviously very different from then, and they've refinanced it since, of course. IPO'd in 2012, allows raising of capital to be done in a slightly different way, I guess. But yeah, we're all looking at that interest rate. What does it mean? I mean, if you were to take the current interest rate at United on those two bonds, which is pretty low, and applied between 5 and 8%, as you say, it would have a pretty significant impact on the overall bottom line, how much interest we're paying, which is depending on how much of that Bank of America line of credit we actually have in play at any one time, between 22 and 35 million pounds a year in interest, right? So this is the interesting thing. And then on top of the kind of P&L, there's Sir Jim's £2 billion stadium project, which will have to be, which I think, as you say, with Barcelona, with that special purpose vehicle, will probably be a similar arrangement at United. It's not going to be raised through Manchester United PLC, but how attractive will that be? So Jim and Omar Barada were out there, a couple of months ago when the stadium was announced, selling it already, and they'll have to do that. And how much of Sir Jim's capital will there be? £0 until he takes over, I would say. How much will be raised from the markets, and what kind of institutions will be financing that? All very interesting and pretty significant. I mean, I know there's been commentary around the Premier League that there's quite a few people who are sort of in the biz that think United will not be able to raise this much capital. And the question then will be, is that true? And how much does Sir Jim have to put in himself if that is true?
Yeah, and I think also, we've discussed this in the past, but is the whole of the stadium going to be financed through debt, right? And what I mean by that is you could just get some external equity investment to come in and potentially do revenue shares, that sort of stuff, to underpin a lot of the stadium. It does feel like that is more of an option for United. But I did think it was also interesting, Barcelona openly stating how much revenue they expect to get from the new stadium.
Mm-hmm.
Around about 250 million euros.
Which is perfectly feasible, because if you look at what Real Madrid are doing, it's about 200 million euros a year that they're getting through the new stadium, mega amount of concerts, rotating pitch, covered, all of the kind of stuff. Every single club on the planet needs to look at it like this, because using your stadium for between 20 and 30 games a season, or days a season versus 300 odd, it's just underutilized, and it's a very heavy asset that you want to exploit much more frequently. And that is very much built into the design of the new stadium. I mean, the covered areas are massive. It's one of the biggest sort of building projects in Europe, basically, because they want to be able to use that like a shopping mall, like a concert venue, multiple concert venues, stadium, obviously, and so on and so on and so on. One of the other interesting things, I guess, about how Real Madrid did it versus Barcelona, they got lucky in a sense, didn't they? Because COVID came along, they had to play behind closed doors for nearly a year anyway, and they were able to accelerate that project. And Barcelona have not been able to do that, and they've been playing in Montjuic for the last 18 months or something like that, which is, the fans hate it. It's a trek up a hill. It's not well served by public transport. It's not a great atmosphere because there's a running track and all of that. And that's had quite a significant impact on their finances as well. So they're having to do it the hard way. United, of course, the plan is to play in this stadium until the new one is built, which certainly helps. But it does mean that you have two assets having to be financed at the same time, Manchester United PLC and all their debt and the stadium. And that's probably why people around the business have some doubts.
Totally. And I think people obviously talk about the debt quite a lot with United. I think an overall restructuring, as and when there is change of ownership, typically always happens. And that's what's happened at Everton. I do think that if you take into consideration some of the guidance that United have put out there about being the most profitable club in the world, I think the timing of when that debt raise happens and ultimately the upturn in the, team's performances, I think it all just kind of points to next season being incredibly critical to all of those plans.
Yeah. One thing we didn't mention just before we move on is who those external investors might be, right? So there's one thing raising from the public markets, a bond issue, for example. We'll see. That's how United did it before. There's private equity investment and perhaps not necessarily some of the high street names that we'd all expect who are involved. We heard in the bidding process in the first place, Ares Capital and so on. And then quasi-nation state stuff. I mean, I'm sure if the Saudis were given the opportunity to invest, I don't know, $1 billion, they would jump at it unbelievably quickly. Just look at what they did with the Club World Cup and DAZN. MBS said, yeah, go for it. And they found $1 billion for absolutely nothing. It was amazing. Just to sponsor this Club World Cup. All right, I'm unbelievably cynical about this. And it's funny, it's a story that's not really told at all in any of the coverage, exactly how this happened, that FIFA magically came up with $1 billion in prize money. But there you go.
No, the stadium attendances, I think, have been telling. And look, there might be some of this, which is, it wasn't marketed very well beforehand and it was kind of rushed through to kind of get it started. But, just compare that to what the likely attendances are going to be for preseason tours over in the States. I think I haven't been watching too much of it, but there have been games which have caught my attention. I think Real Madrid versus, I think it was Al Hilal, which was a 1-1 draw maybe, or I can't remember. So there were some new fixtures which are interesting and different and which could be fun. But I think the level of money being thrown at this feels a little bit odd at the moment.
Well, it's very distorting. Yeah, I mean, I've only seen goals, but I think it's good from a kind of competitive point of view that some of the big European names have been knocked out. Unsurprising after very lengthy seasons and all of that, but it makes it more interesting from that point of view. The winners will take home $150 million, which is very distorting. Even Auckland, who I think walked away with 4 or 5 million, that's about 10 years worth of revenue. I mean, yeah. All right, we'll move on to Villa, who are not in the Club World Cup, much as they'd like to be. Their owners are actually, the net worth of their owners is incredible if you look it up, and it's not talked about much, but it's about 18 billion, I think, between the two of them. So they've got an awful lot of money and they're very ambitious and they obviously want to join the elite group, and the red cartel has been holding them back with their, we all roll up one trouser leg when we put these PSR rules on Villa just to hold them back. Villa and Newcastle, we're just like evil. What are their issues? Why is it different between the Premier League, which they haven't failed yet? Although that is a big question. And UEFA rules, which they definitely have. And they are structured differently, these rules, and have very different levels of teeth as well.
The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. Your info is in endless places that could expose you to identity theft, leading to lost funds. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
It's the final chapter of the college football playoff.
It comes down to this.
Miami's unmatched grit and tenacity through the postseason has led them home. The national title now within reach.
They are confident. They are battle-tested.
Undefeated Indiana, led by Chris Signetti and Heisman winner Fernando Mendoza, have the chance to take home their first title and claim college football immortality.
The most remarkable turnaround in the history of college football.
The College Football Playoff National Championship presented by AT&T. Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN and the ESPN app.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire wrong. So our orders get all backed up. We're drowning in paperwork, then actually drowning. Carol is fighting off sharks with a stapler, and pirates are pillaging the office copier, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant goes beyond the resume, using unique insights to deliver a smarter shortlist. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
Exactly. So I think let's take the Premier League one first, a little bit more straightforward. So you're allowed up to 105 million losses over a 3-year rolling period. That's after some deductions have been made from your cost base. So if you're investing in, say, a new stadium or your women's team or youth development, they don't get counted towards the losses. And Villa have been racking up pretty gargantuan amount of losses. Yeah. Over the last 2 years, it's just under 200 million pounds. Recall, Sir Jim Ratcliffe talking about United's 3-year losses being 300 million. Villa were kind of on track to do the same thing, and they've got nowhere near the amount of revenue that United do. They have approximately half. So that's pretty problematic. And it means they're pretty close to breaching the rules. So I think even, if you take a generous view on what their allowable deductions could be, they were going to be, I'd say, a reasonable kind of double-digit figure, breaching of the rules. When it comes to UEFA squad cost rule, it is a little bit different. And so there's a rule there which is called the squad cost rule, which means that your wages as a portion of your revenue have to be within a certain limit. And for last season just gone, that was 80%. We know that Villa was probably somewhere in the region of mid-80s%. So they're at risk of breaching that as well. What are they trying to do to resolve it? Well, there's been two big things that have been reported on. The first one is selling their women's team. And the second is selling some land that they have, which is something called the warehouse site, which is basically an events venue that they own. Both of them are in the region of around £100 million, reportedly. For the women's team, that's going to be sold to an entity called V Sports and outside investors. V Sports will probably be getting about 90%, outside investors 10%. Most likely, in my view, US investors or private equity. Yeah.
And V Sports is part of the group of, so they sold it themselves, effectively, much like Chelsea did. And we now have the benchmark. The Premier League have twice had a chance, the collective, I don't mean the Premier League as a body separately, have had a chance to vote on this. It wasn't even voted on last time. Seems like it's a one-time thing as well. It's so short-sighted, but every single club is looking at this and going, yeah, well, that's an opportunity. Although there aren't that many clubs that have a viable entity to sell, as in women's team. So Newcastle, they're in the Championship. They've been putting quite a bit of money into that because they were effectively an amateur side 2 years ago. That's an option for them at some point once they get into the Women's Super League. Chelsea have already done it. Arsenal, I don't know. I don't know if they do this. It'd be interesting. They don't need to anyway. There's a big headroom for PSR at Arsenal, but it's also such an important part of the club's identity now. Massive crowds at the Emirates when they play their Women's Champions League winners last season, of course. United can't happen until there's an ownership change. If Sir Jim bought the women's team in another group of companies, he'd be effectively handing the Glazers free money when it comes to negotiating a change of ownership at some point later. So I would expect, although it looks easy and there's a benchmark, I don't expect that to happen now. Liverpool have been chronically underfunding their women's team and don't need the money right now. City, it's already part of their whole group, and I don't know why they would. Do they need to do more intra-group selling of assets? I mean, It seems unlikely. I mean, I think Melbourne FC pay like £3 million a year to license the name from the group. It's all sorts of dodgy stuff going on there. So we'll see whether other teams try this trick. Villa will probably in the best sort of state to do that, but it's been left open. Free money, I guess. UEFA, they've basically given up, as far as I can tell, on having any teeth. So although there are rules, squad cost rules, they really only have 2 sanctions at the moment. They haven't kicked anyone out of a tournament for an awful long time. Loss isn't the right word. After what happened with City, where they won their case and then CAS said, hang on a minute, your own rules say you can't look at anything further back than 7 years, and they very narrowly framed it anyway, which is good for the Premier League. So they only had 6 emails. That was it. That was the basis of their entire case. The Premier League has thousands of pages. But after that, UEFA basically said, we're not going to try and sanction clubs by kicking them out anymore. And the 2 things they do are either fines. I think United got a very narrow fine a few years back for basically an admin error, or limitations on squad size. So you can, Paris Saint-Germain and City both had this, where you go down from 25 to 23 players or 21 players or whatever it is. And that can be the sanction for a season. Not a lot of teeth there, really.
No, and I think it's why you're seeing clubs like Villa and Chelsea almost willingly fail these rules. One thing to note is that UEFA don't allow profits from intra-group transactions to count towards this calculation. And so that's why the women's team sale will be great for the Premier League PSR, but not for the UEFA squad cost rule, and why Villa still have an issue. And I think, what we've seen so far, as you say, is like a binding cost reduction plan or like a multi-year spending cap. I do think that they have to alter this approach. I think, without at least the threat of, say, withholding revenue from the Champions League, which is continuously going up, or, competition expulsion, it's hard to really see why teams won't just continue to do what Villa and Chelsea are doing if you're, say, an ambitious upstart.
Right. And the allowable losses effectively in the Premier League are quite a bit larger as well. So you go up to that limit and just breach the UEFA rules and take a 2-player hit or whatever it is. It seems like just the cost of doing business, to be honest. The knock-on effect, do Villa need to sell Ollie Watkins? Well, we're into the new financial year now. We've gone past the 1st of July. There weren't that kind of rash of player you've never heard of being sold for 25 million. It's still, of all of those, the most shocking one was still Nottingham Forest's reserve goalkeeper going to Newcastle for over 20 million and never playing a fucking minute. It's so unbelievably dodgy. But we didn't get that this year, so that might give an indicator of like where clubs feel they're at. They've obviously had quite a few years now to kind of adjust. The score cost rule has not been implemented in the Premier League. There's been a lot of talk about it. They delayed it for another year. I expect at some point they will align with UEFA, depending on how many clubs feel like they can arbitrage these rules against each other. But it probably likely it'll come into the Premier League. The difference with the Premier League proposal was to have this kind of ceiling as well, which would be a multiple of the club who takes home the lowest amount of revenue. And they were talking about 5x, which I think the bottom place team in the Premier League will have taken over just over 100 million in in Premier League revenue, so prize money, broadcast facility fees and so on. So maximum squad cost then would be, I think it was 5.5. I might be wrong there. Like, let's call it 550 million. No one will get close to that at all, right? So it's a kind of false ceiling, but there's a lot of talk about whether they should do that to make the competitive environment fair-ish. We'll see whether that happens or not.
Yeah, and I think, if you look back at the UEFA landscape report, there was a comment within that which talked about, from a UEFA perspective, saying that, these sporting financial regulations need to more closely align. I actually think there is an element of the clubs probably do agree with that. like there's less administrative burden first and foremost. And I think the more that you can have alignment, the easier it is for everyone to almost manage to these things. I think the ultimate thing is going to be, well, okay, does that just retain the status quo? And how much harder does it make for the smaller clubs to compete in that environment just because they just don't have the same amount of scale?
Yeah. And that's always been the argument, hasn't it? That this is the argument from this is the red cartel brigade, lot. Who are saying you're just holding us back. I mean, Gary Neville has been on this as well. I mean, of course, he's not a neutral party here. They've effectively done the same thing at Salford, where they've tried to buy their way out of non-league to League 2, League 1. He's argued that owners should be able to put a bond up, which effectively says, hey, we want to breach the rules, but here's our cash to match that. And so it takes away the kind of unsustainability part of it, right? So if the rules came in for a variety of reasons, right? First, and the principal argument when they came in 10 years ago was, look, all these clubs are going bust because it's highly competitive. They're chasing the dream, quote unquote, as happened to Leeds. Let's bring these rules in to make everyone sustainable. And it really did do that. It brought the overall debt level in European football overall down by hundreds and hundreds of millions of euros because suddenly clubs had to be a bit more constrained in their spending. And it's the only thing that forced them. Funny thing is, in the Super League, which everyone hated, there were also even tighter rules because they recognized this, that you can't make a profit in this world when you're competing with 50 other clubs who, can all spend money as well. And so it does hold back clubs. The second reason PSR rules came in, let's be honest, was we had states and quasi-states like Roman and Abramovich spending effectively unlimited money, and it skewed and distorted these markets, and it led to sort of unfair competition, and there was a willingness, certainly at UEFA, to hold that back a little bit. And so it does hold these ambitious medium-sized clubs back. You could argue it's for their own good, because what if the Villa owners decided, we're not interested anymore? Right? That's the risk. Of course, they have hundreds of millions of pounds invested into that now. So the motivation for them to walk away is very low, but still there's that argument. Would the bond situation work in the Premier League? Well, it would just mean that Manchester City and Newcastle and maybe Villa, although it's slightly different, but definitely Manchester City and Newcastle could just spend as much as they wanted, right? Because they could put up £500 million a season and go, yeah, there you go. So there'd be nothing to stop them being a league of two.
Yeah, I think I've got no issue with outside investment to, try and make a club competitive. I do like the bond idea. I also like the idea of almost like if you have a change in ownership, you have a 3-year, say, investment cycle of a specific amount. And as you come out of that, you then kind of taper back to what everyone else should be. So it's almost like you've got 3 to 5 years, say, to make this work and put your plan into action. And then you've got to be able to adhere to what everyone else is doing. I think also the big thing here with all of this is all of football pretty much, with some exceptions by country, has gone through a major cycle of growth, a boom cycle of growth, thanks to TV deals. How that continues to move is somewhat going to determine how football finances look. Clubs now, particularly in the Premier League, are so reliant on TV income in order to make them sustainable. If that starts to slow, or there's not a dramatic change in how football is distributed on TVs or on the internet, there's going to be serious problems, because you can't just magic revenue out of thin air forever.
No, and we saw in the last 2 cycles that it was flat domestically. The Sky purchase, predominantly Sky, that there weren't these big influxes of tech capital. Apple didn't get involved, Facebook didn't get involved, Netflix, and all of that kind of stuff that was mooted internationally, it's kept growing, but there aren't too many more markets that the Premier League is not tapped into. There's been massive growth in the US market. It's over $1 billion a year. It's like a 5x on the, maybe even more than, maybe more like 10x on the MLS deal. Show you how much interest there is there, but how much more could it expand? We'll see after the 2026 World Cup just how much of a stimulus that creates for, interest in football in the States. But where are the other bigger markets? There's been no movement in China, for example. In fact, that contract was ripped up and the Premier League took quite a large hit there. India is the other one everyone looking at, most populous country on the planet, growing middle class. Is there a lot of interest in the Premier League? But where's the room for growth really? And then the perennial question around, should the Premier League go it alone and launch some kind of, Premflix style deal? And what would then be the elasticity of demand in each of these markets, right? How far could you push the revenue up in the UK and the US and big markets compared to areas where you would need to sell it for, effectively £1 a month or something like that, where there's much lower income, GDP per capita, and so on and so on. It's not like there isn't a model there, though, right? It's very easy to go, we understand this. And that elasticity has already been sort of calculated by the broadcasters in each of those markets. So could you push that more by changing the price or marketing in a different way or not giving the broadcasters their cut and so on?
I have created the most advanced AI soldier.
The wait is over. Tron Ares now streaming on Disney+.
We are looking for something you've discovered. And some of us will stop at nothing to get it.
Ready? The countdown is complete.
There's no going back.
Our directive is clear.
Hang on!
Tron Ares now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
Yeah, and I think that to me seems to be like the most obvious route here. And I think you can also give back to the consumer a little bit in that model. The classic internalize some of that margin that you're giving away. Whether the Premier League will do that, TBC, because obviously, the setup costs and overall running costs of, basically having a media enterprise in and of themselves will still be pretty sizable.
Although some of that's been done. Premier League Productions has been around a while. In fact, they did that in some markets where they didn't have a TV deal. I think it was in Hong Kong and New Zealand. And they still produce sort of in-house magazine programs and highlights and stuff like that for certain markets who just want to take the feed and not do their own setup. So I don't know how much cost there would be. There definitely would be. And they'd have to create a marketing engine as well, which they don't have now. The broadcasters do that.
If I remember correctly, there is a change to how some of the rights are being sold internationally in 2030. And there has been moves to kind of move some elements of production in-house. So it feels like that's going to be the direction of travel. Whether ultimately that does lead to kind of the big boom another big boom in revenue, time will tell.
Yeah. A couple of points before we move on. So I had my team way back when in one of my old strategy jobs look at this TV market. A colleague of mine, it's telecoms market, but about if you take telecoms as both mobile and fixed telecoms, about 15% of global revenue is through media. And most of that is just bundling. You sell it through a cable package effectively. Telefonica also has a TV service in Spain, for example, right? But it's always been seen as stable revenue. And so I had this argument with a colleague of mine about how stable that was. I was like, it's a slow running car crash. Watch that disappear. We should think about how we, advise our stakeholders on what they're doing. And he was like, no. So we did a lot of analysis. And the thing that holds people back is not necessarily the fee for whatever service, paying £15 a month for Netflix or whatever it is how many you fit into your wallet, right? And there's just a hard cap on that, on how many entertainment services people are willing to spend. And it looked like about 2.5 on average, right? So you'll buy Netflix and HBO and half of something else. but you wouldn't add another one there. And it'd be interesting how people saw the Premier League, vis-a-vis other entertainment, right? So would they be willing to give up their Netflix account in order to have Premflix? That's the competition, very, very starkly when it's not bundled and it's separated out like that. So we'll see on that.
Was that just on mobile out of interest?
No, we were looking across mobile and fixed. So the revenue, the ARPU looks very different, of course, because fixed line internet has always run on incredibly tight margins. In some markets, mobile internet has very good margins. Not across Europe, because there's 4 carriers in each market and they're all competing with each other in insane ways. 400 million people across Europe. Map that across to the States and there's only 3, right? So, hey, surprise, you can charge a lot more. And a few other markets, it looks kind of similar to that. So, but the economics across fibre and fixed line look kind of different. And the split between consumer and B2B looks very different as well.
Interesting.
Chelsea, who keep buying players. I think someone pointed out they now have 15 forwards. I don't know how they're all going to get game time. Rory Delap was like, yeah, I'm number 1 at the Club World Cup. Oh, hang on a minute. They keep buying players. They're buying players during the tournament. Hey, we didn't mention this. You can buy a player during the tournament and then play them during the tournament. What?
Yeah, I thought that they changed the transfer windows precisely to avoid that happening.
It's just the whole thing's so bloody corrupt. Yeah. How can Chelsea do this? And they also have, by the way, one of the largest PSR headrooms, according to the Athletics analysis a month or so ago. And what is the game here? I mean, how they can do it is they sold a hotel and the women's team to themselves and injected a lot of capital from Clearlake and others. But what they think their business model is, having this many assets, seems a bit odd.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it feels like clearly a lot of asset value within football clubs is linked to players. And if you have a view that football is a growing market, the premiums on good players is going to go up. And therefore, if you buy them younger and you are better at identifying that talent than others, you can get a significant amount of revenue and also profit from trading those players. And if you actually look historically, Chelsea were or have been very, very good at doing that. They had Neil Bath and Jim Fraser, who effectively set up their kind of youth setup in its current guise. It seems like they're kind of taking that strategy and turning it into turbo drive.
Yeah, it's interesting. When the Glazers took over United, this was one of the questions they put to David Gill. He recounted this later, saying, could they make money out the transfer market? And Gill was like, no, we're a buying club, not a selling club. Impossible to do that. Chelsea, in a sense, have proven that wrong. I think they're miles away. It's them and City and just everyone else, right? Hundreds of millions over the last 10 years they've managed to sell, often in younger players, not always. They've come out that youth setup and they've found a very good market there. We've talked about it before. United haven't. And when you're failing as a club overall, the kind of stink spreads, doesn't it? And United haven't been able to sell very effectively for quite some time now. I think we were bottom of that particular table.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's shocking. It's a fourth revenue stream and a big advantage. So maybe they're playing that. I think the interesting thing is, like, these aren't 16, 17-year-olds, though. They're between 21 and 24 mostly, and they're on 7-8 year contracts. Some of those were before the Premier League closed the loophole on amortization of those contracts, but not always. They're still giving out 7 and 8 year contracts to players and only amortizing it over 5 years, right? So there's not a PSR advantage there. They think there's a strategic advantage from having those players on extremely long contracts. My doubt there is twofold. One is the obvious one. What if that player fails? getting them off the books becomes hard. They are putting them on fairly low wages. But the second doubt really is linked to the low wages. When that player does well, they're going to have to give them a big contract.
Yeah.
They're going to have to. Otherwise, you're going to have an awful lot of players unhappy that they could be earning twice as much elsewhere. So I guess we haven't seen that play out fully yet. Like, the drama hasn't really unfolded. They managed to flog a couple of players to the Saudi Pro League at a bit of a loss. Kubilali, for example. But we haven't seen a real damaging effect of one of these long-term contracts yet.
No, and what we also haven't seen is them really start to sell too many of these recent purchases. And I think that's going to be the litmus test, because, as you say, whilst those players aren't kind of under 18s necessarily, they are of an age where they can play pretty good standard of football. And they are also not holding back in terms of the fees that they're paying. You know, they're paying 10s, 20s, 30 million pounds for some of these players.
Well, for Quenda, even more like 70. So if you add in all the add-ons.
So they're making an awful lot of big bets. I have my questions as to whether at the levels that they're doing it at in terms of the fees, how successful this can possibly be. And is this just a question of jamming for tomorrow? Unless they have an incredible financial mechanism that I've not thought about yet, or many others who are smarter than me.
You don't read the Premier League handbook late at night and looking through the rules going,
Not just yet.
Yeah.
I'll do that outside.
Pillow talk. Yeah. It's like, hey, darling, did you know that rule 14.214 allows you to, we'll see with Chelsea whether they can pull this off. They certainly have to make some sales. If not from a financial point of view, certainly from a squad point of view. You can't have a bomb squad that we've got a bomb squad of 4, which will be interesting when they all come back. Anthony Sancho. Sancho looks like it might resolve itself soon, but on Monday, everyone is back on training. Marcus Rashford is going to be back training. Is he going to be training with the main group, or have they fallen out so much that he's got to go off and train with the under-21s or something? So we have 4 of them. Although Anthony, they'll be able to reintegrate, so maybe it's 3, because what happens with Garnacho as well as Sancho, they're all training together.
Yeah.
Chelsea have, they can only register 25, and then plus the B list of some of the younger players where they qualify. Not all of them do for the B list. There's another 20 players there that they're going to have to find loans for or sell before the end of the window. And obviously they've got Strasbourg in Blue Co, which is their multi-club ownership group. The rumours are that they're looking for other clubs around Europe, maybe in Portugal as well. We'll see what they do there. I mean, you can farm players like this, I guess, if you have enough of those clubs. City certainly do. They move players around their group. They've got 13 clubs. Maybe that's the plan.
Yeah, multi-club ownership. Yeah, multi-club ownership and sell players within the structure, and as long as it's of market value, then actually, Chelsea probably stand to win because they would be the premium asset within that portfolio. The other thing that I've heard whispers of, and I don't know how real this is, but the concept of B teams for Premier League and those becoming a little bit more meaningful in terms of competing against other teams, whether that's also kind of a long-term play here, which is, at Chelsea.
It'd have to be more meaningful though. I mean, the idea that you could stick Chelsea B into League One and just parachute them in, I think that'll be rejected by English football culture generally, and it should be, right?
Yeah,
because you're effectively kicking a team out of the football pyramid as a result. There is the Papa John's Trophy, but that really is reserves versus League 1, 2 clubs, and they're not well attended, those games, and their standard isn't super high, and all of that kind of stuff. I don't think it's doing the thing that everyone wants, which is bridging the gap, or either allowing you to farm players like this or bridging the gap to the Premier League. And maybe that's old school thinking now, just bridging the gap. It's not about that. It's about being able to play a 50-man squad. I would hope that English football culture, I'm old school, right? I think it's, I like the tournament structure. I don't want Premier League B teams in the pyramid like you have in Spain. It's just that's a bit ick.
Yeah, I think it would be shocking for football in the UK if it did happen. I think there'd be a lot of heritage and a lot of history lost, and I never think that that's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had an argument on Twitter with a journalist, won't say who was like, in a very arrogant way, was just like, delete the League Cup. I'm like, there's 75 years of history there. Plus, the financial impact on the Football League is quite significant, right? You'd have to replace that without even talking about the history of the tournament and how important. And look, it was founded in the 60s, not the 1860s. So it's not quite like the structure of the Football League, but it's become a part of the culture. And I don't know. I'm messing with that. I think you're playing with fire a little bit. And I know life moves on. I certainly look at my own kids and their lack of interest in football, which disgusts me. They are for sale for anyone who'd like to offer me part ownership if you want. I don't mind. We'll look at a structure here. But yeah, they're not being United fans. I don't know what's worse. They're not being interested in football at all and being interested in gaming, which is what, Florentine Perez at Real Madrid goes, I told you exactly what the youth are. I suppose it's better than being like City fans or Liverpool fans or something disgusting like that.
Yeah, I mean, I do. It's interesting. Like, I do think that more and more we're just seeing that the Premier League is just not got, and football in general, it's not the easy ride that it once was. Like the growth train has slowed, and now you've got to work harder. Whether that's to improve the product on the pitch and get people watching TV, whether that's people having a better relationship and a closer relationship with their fans. And this sounds like a really throwaway sort of comment and line, but, regaining connection of like what the badge means. I think there are so many clubs now, primarily because of financial reasons, that are sacrificing an awful lot.
Yeah.
And, I do think clubs almost need to work harder.
Yeah. Well, I actually agree. And it's not just the sort of 1958 line, which is like, you're rinsing the fans. They are rinsing the fans and people walk away. People are being priced out. It's also at what point is it saturated, right? Both in terms of number of games we play, number of games on TV. It's massively growing this year, the number of Premier League games. There is a hard cap on that of 370 games a year. We're going to get over 270, right? Almost everything will be televised. Will people keep watching? Premier League viewing figures, at least domestically, fell last season. That is a big warning sign, right? Because that means a loss of advertising revenue and subscription revenue to the broadcasters. They will not pay as much under the current structure if that continues, right? And that might just have been the league was wrapped up really early. There's not enough competition, all of that kind of stuff. But this is, warning signs, right? You cannot just rinse your supporters forever. And that connection in some form or another has to be there as well for people to keep feeling like it's good value.
Totally. And the reality is football, if you like around the world, football is not the only sport. Yeah. And even in the UK.
Or entertainment.
Yeah. There are plenty more good value avenues out there. Look at what's happening in rugby. They're trying to revolutionize their game. There's R360, which is backed by some pretty serious people to try and monetize their game. It's only going to get harder.
Yeah, but you have to. We've got England versus India in the cricket. It's become a minority sport. I guess it always sort of was. I mean, it was sort of the national game that wasn't quite as well attended as the football. But there are no attendances at county championship games at all. The only thing that sustains English cricket is Test cricket, which is well attended, and T20 in the 100 tournament, right? The short form stuff. 50 over cricket basically doesn't exist anymore. and it's become a minority sport because they sold TV rights to Sky, and almost nobody watches it. I mean, it's fantastic coverage, but nobody is watching, right? And the risk there is that over time, what has happened is just become a posh boy sport in England, right? It's played in private schools, but nowhere else. And you start to think, does that limit your pool of talent and people who are interested over the long term? I was texting with Paul, my old co-host. We're both cricket fans. And I'm like, I can't believe England's still producing talented players. Like, the pool of people that are playing at school level is tiny.
Yeah. And sorry, the thing that I forgot to mention, the PFA are now starting to potentially show some teeth and threatening to strike because of this thing about the number of games. Yeah.
Well, FIFPro said the same thing. I mean, they've been doing studies. FIFPro is like the collection of PFAs around the world, and they've been looking at the impact. And now you have 3 summers out of 4, so Euros and other continental cups, World Cup and Club World Cup, which Infantino, I'm sure, would love to do every 2 years to fill the other window, basically. You've got the top players in the world playing like for 300 days a year, basically, or something like that. I mean, it's an incredible amount of football. If they do, we'll have a discussion about exactly how they've done that. Jamie, subprime goals on Substack, excellent Substack, Twitter, Blue Sky, I think you're on as well. Instagram. No, I think we've covered an awful lot there.
Yeah, a lot.
Some of it was about United. Yeah. All right, when United whip out the checkbook and spend £60 million on Ollie Watkins, it won't happen. But if they do, we'll have a discussion about exactly how they've done that. Jamie, subprime goals on Substack, excellent Substack, Twitter, Blue Sky, I think you're on as well.
Yeah.
Instagram.
No. I'm not sure how well Football Finance will go down on Instagram.
It's not really a visual. I mean, you do a lot of charts, I guess.
Yeah, true. Maybe you give me a new BD idea.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Ed. Pleasure as always.
Bye now.